All right. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to start a new VS Code project somewhere just on my desktop. Just going to create a random folder and then open VS Code in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to solve a problem using Python. And we're going to just kind of go through and we're going to come up with this. We're going to plan out what we're going to do first. Then we're going to come up with some initial solution, and then we're going to kind of try to refactor it a few times until we get a final version that is, better than what we did initially. All right, so I'm going to see where I am, ls. So I'm right here. I'm going to create a directory, so mkdir, and I will call it, so this example will be so I'll talk about the program in a sec that we're going to write, but I'm going to cd into this directory that I just created, and then code dot. So I will open VS Code in the current directory. I'm going to try using a light theme. So let me know if this is more or less readable. Yeah, just going to try it out this time. Even though I don't really like using it myself, but I think it on video. Let me know if it translates better. All right, cool. So I've got my window open. I'm gonna open up the console here by doing Control Backtick is the shortcut on a Mac, and I'm gonna create a file. So it's a couple ways to create a file. I can do it on the command line, touch, and then whatever the file name is. I can also go up here and click on this add file. So I'll do it right here. So this will be called edits.py. All right. So what is this problem? So the problem is, this is obviously going to be a contrived example, but so the idea is you're going to start with some kind of string, and we're going to have to then process that string, make some changes to it, and then return something else that has been, properly edited. So an example of the input, the input would be something like, hi there. Let's do this. And what we would expect to get returned would be something like this. Right? So we get a string, and what we want to return is basically a list of strings that have been modified. So a couple rules. So you can maybe deduce some of the rules based on this example, but the main one basically sentences. So you have to break up the string into sentences, and that's going to happen based on punctuation. So for now, we're just going to keep it simple. So you only have to worry about question marks and periods. The other thing you have to do is the first letter has to be capitalized and no other letters can be capitalized. So right here, the input, both of these words are capitalized. So in the output, the first one stays and the second one gets lowercase. And then in this example, the first one is not uppercase and the returned is uppercase. So what we can count on for the input is that sentences end in either a period or a question mark. Any questions about the problem?
So we do want the period and the question mark in the list?
Yes. So when you return it, the punctuation should be included. Any other questions that anyone wants to ask about this problem? So oftentimes, excuse me, I have a cough, so I apologize. Um, in an interview situation, if you're given like a problem to solve during an interview, um, they'll they'll often briefly describe the problem, and it's generally a good idea to ask as many clarifying questions as you need to slash can. I would err on the side of maybe being slightly obnoxious, just so you understand exactly what the problem is. Because what, what you don't want to do is think that you understand what the problem is, and then start writing a solution, and then well, it turns out that's not actually what they want. So that's also that skill kind of translates to the job where you're going to get a task to do, which could be anything, and the first thing you're going to do is figure out what actually is this task. Because when you get something to do, it's like, okay, fix this bug somewhere. You're not going to get a detailed set of steps to solve the problem. You're just going to get, well, it looks like this thing is probably broken. So the first thing you have to do is figure out what the problem actually is. Okay. All right. So let's say that we understand what we're going to get and what we should be returning. So now let's kind of think about the steps that we would go through, breaking down this into smaller steps. So I will say, to make this slightly more difficult, we're not going to be able to use like split. So one possible way to do approach this would be to like split the string based on period or whatever, but we're not going to do that. So we have some restrictions. So let's just try to think about the steps that we would go through. Are there any intermediate steps we can break this problem into?
We're going to want to turn everything into lowercase.
Okay, good. Yeah. So that I think that's definitely something we could do. So make everything lowercase. So we can talk about I'll just kind of order these, but it's possible that we could order them differently. For now, we'll just leave it like this.
Could we just turn the whole string into a list using like the list function?
Okay. Okay, so we don't have to worry about the implementation details yet, but yeah, you're right. We should take this string and turn it into a list. That's the point. So turn string into list of strings.
Separate the string into two parts after each punctuation.
Okay. Yeah. So I think So I'm gonna say that like the way we do that will be included here. So we don't really know how we're gonna do that yet. We'll worry about that later, but we know that we're gonna have to take this and turn it into a list of strings where, so I could be more specific here, where strings end in a punctuation mark, which for our case is going to be either a period or a question mark.
I guess
So-
I got another question.
Sure.
Do we want this to work for any input, or do we know, because like for that input, like we could use slicing, but like if we didn't know, or if we wanted it for everyone, then like maybe regex or something would be a better option.
Okay, good. So that's a great question. So yeah, we want to make this we want to make whatever program we write generalizable. So this is just one example input, but we could have any number of things. So we don't know how long these strings are going to be. You know, it could be 500 characters, could be 10 characters.
So if we can't use the split method, I'm thinking we probably should loop through every letter and then use some kind of conditional once we reach the period, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a good thought. We'll get there in a sec, but we're still trying to stay at a high level right now. So we're not really worried about how we're going to do all this stuff. We just want to break this into high level steps that we can then implement later. So we've got, so if our input is this and our output is this, we know that, okay, we can make everything lowercase. We can split this string into a list of other strings. So let me, for example, write example intermediate outputs for each of these steps. So let's do. So I'll take this, and if I lowercase this would be pi there. Okay, so we got that. And then for this one, let's assume that that these are kind of connected together, right? So the output of this will be the input of the next one. So if we turn this into this, so this would be now comma. Okay. So we're still missing something.
Uppercase the start of the string.
Yeah.
I think we need to build an empty string since strings are immutable.
Okay. So let's, yeah, we're still not worried about how we're gonna do this exactly. We just want to. So the next step would be to uppercase the first, right? So so then the result of this would look like that. Excuse me. So I think we're probably, does anyone see any other steps we might need to add? Okay, so I think we have a pretty good plan. I think we have a pretty good understanding of the problem and a good general plan. So now we're actually going to start writing some code. So I'm gonna copy these. I'm gonna copy this down here, and let's implement step 1. So we have this input string, and we want to get something that's lowercase. So I could be very cruel and not allow you to use the lower method, but Python actually does have. Does anyone know what the Python method is for making strings lowercase?
I think it's just lower with parentheses, right?
Okay. So let's start with, I'm going to copy this right here. And I'm going to call this text. Oops. All right. So I guess all we have to do is lower, what should we, someone tell me what the type here.
Text dot lower parentheses.
Okay. Cool. Do anyone have any, what are we gonna, are we gonna be able to use this?
Yeah, you have to name it, give it a variable name X, whatever you
Okay.
want.
So what variable name should we give it?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not good at that. XA, other one.
Okay. Yeah. So you're right. We should definitely take this value and assign it to a variable. Naming things is one of those. It doesn't really seem like it's a coding problem, but it really is. So thinking of names that describe what it is, it's important. That's something you should think about. So what kind of thing is this? So we're starting out with this text. So what?
You can call it reading.
How's that?
Reading.
Reading?
Greeting. Yeah. I don't know.
Oh, greeting. Yeah. So that's true. So in this case, this is a greeting, but our input text could really be anything. So what are we doing here?
I would just call the variable lowercase.
Yeah, I think something like that would be.
Yeah,
So,
you could do like text underscore lowercase is probably what I would do.
okay, I think that works. So this variable name gives you a pretty clear understanding of what this is. So we're starting out with some text, and how are we changing this text? Well, we're lowercase again. So text lowercase makes sense. So we've just written some code, and we think we've solved the problem. Are we sure that this works? That this solves our problem?
Well, the first part, not the whole thing.
Sure, yeah. Are we sure that,
Can we try to print it to see if it works?
okay? Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to do. So print text lowercase. And how do I run this?
Python file name.
Okay. Python edit. All right. Is this by the way, is the font size okay? Can you guys read this? I can make it a little bigger. Okay. So this appears to work, right? So this is the output we're expecting. It looks like this matches. We could definitely test more cases, but I think for, as we're doing this initially, this is probably good. So using print statements, testing intermediate results is a good way to preserve your sanity. You don't want to just write a whole bunch of stuff and then at the very end try to run it and realize that something's broken and now you have no idea where it's broken. Another thing you can do is you can use the debugger. Has anyone used the VS Code debugger? Okay, it's fairly like the basics are fairly straightforward. So the first thing you're gonna do is set a breakpoint. You can see when I go to the left of the numbers here, the line numbers, it's called like a gutter. I get a little red dot. So I can, I'm gonna click this right here. So now I have a breakpoint. And a breakpoint is basically just means when I run the debugger, your code is gonna execute and it's gonna stop at this line. Okay, so now I'm going to go here, run and debug. I'm going to click that. Click on run and debug. You don't need to worry about customizing anything right now. And I'm going to choose Python file, the first option. And you can see that it has, well, you may not be able to see, but it has executed. It's as though I ran, Python edits.py, and it just, instead of executing a whole file, it just stops right here. So you get, excuse me, get a snapshot of your program right now. And there's a few things you can look at. So up here is you have all of the variables that have appeared so far. So we have this variable text, which shows up right here, and you can see what that actually is. And then we don't need to worry about this right here. This is built-in stuff for now. And the call stack, we'll talk a little bit more about this later. So this is just kind of the order in which things are executed. And then right here, you can actually, so in our case, all of the variables that you have available will show up here, but sometimes if you have a lot of variables, it's hard to read and keep track of. So you can, if you're focused on one particular variable, excuse me, you can add it. You can add it right here. So I'm gonna, let's say I care about this, so text lowercase. I'm gonna add this right here. And right now I have a name error. I have a name error because this line hasn't actually been executed yet. So I'm trying to reference a variable that hasn't been defined yet, basically. So what I would need to do to fix that is I'm gonna execute this next line. So this little down arrow, I'm gonna click that, and it's gonna execute this line. So this line has been executed, and now you can see that this variable is defined. So the debugger now knows, like, I'm here in the file, I executed this line, so now I know what this is. So this has been executed, and the return value of this method, which is a string, is assigned to this variable, text lowercase, and now we can see this. So you can execute, and you can now look at the return value here and see, okay, yeah, this is what I expect it to be. Another thing, so that's basically, that's pretty much it. That's like 90% of what the debugger does. It allows you to kind of just slowly, incrementally, execute line by line and see what's happening. You can click this little icon right here, the debug console, and what this allows you to do is you can kind of like play around with the value. So let's say it's kind of like having a shell open, but with your executed code like there available to you. So for example, the next thing we want to do is turn a string into a list of strings or blah, blah, blah. So one thing you could do is start playing around with, okay, so I have this text lowercase. Now I want to turn this into a list of strings. So I'll just play around with it. So text lowercase dot split. We're not going to use this method, but and then I can see that it actually shows up here. So this can be convenient. It's just a way to kind of play around with stuff. Any questions about that?
I do have a question actually. I've been using the Chrome debugger. Would you prefer using the VS versus Chrome or vice versa?
So the Chrome debugger is fine, but that's that's only for JavaScript, and that's when you're running JavaScript in the browser, which we're not always going to be doing.
Okay.
But it's the same basic idea. All right. So that's the debugger, which can come in handy. All right, so I'm going to stop this. Press the stop arrow. And let's see. All right, so I'm going to run this file again. Whoops. Okay, so we're back here. I think this works. So let's just say we're good there. And step 2. What is step 2? So this one's going to be a little tricky.
I would start by declaring an empty string, maybe.
Okay. So you just talk me through what you're thinking.
My thoughts is you just declare an empty string, get a for loop going, and then start adding to the string as you iterate through the original string, and then
Okay.
make a few conditional statements to make it what you want. And then make the string empty once you get what you want out of it, and then push it into an array.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like we're gonna need to create an empty array, maybe, and then also an empty string.
Hmm.
So we could create an empty array and an empty string, and then iterate over. So it'll be this: iterate over our example, and then somehow figure out how to move things around. We can start with that. So let's do we'll call this sentences. And then what should we call our empty string?
Would it be confusing just to call it sentence?
What do other people think?
You just call it letters.
You call it what?
Is it letters?
Letters? Yeah, so what will the empty string end up being?
Would be the greeting, I guess, huh?
It could be a greeting. So yeah, I wouldn't focus. So this happens to be a greeting, but this could be anything. This could be any
Well,
sentence.
greeting too, I mean, in a way. That's quibbling, but
Yeah, so the input, I mean, yeah, what we're saying it's high there, but it could be,
it could be anything, I guess,
yeah,
right?
this is a book, I am writing code. It doesn't, yeah.
I guess to be more specific, maybe we could call it single sentence.
Okay. Call it single sentence. I think sentence is probably good. So if we're thinking about what are we trying to do, we're taking this block of text, which is just a string, and we're breaking it up into individual sentences. So each sentence is going to be its own string. So whatever, I'll just call X for now. So X, if we look at our expected output, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be this at some point, and then later it's going to be this, right? So the question is, what is an appropriate name for each one of these things?
Can we just split by the comma first? Because if there's always going to be a comma, we could actually split and then have like maybe that will create a new list, right?
Yeah, so so that's a good thought. So the thing is that our string doesn't actually have any commas in it, or we're not really concerned with commas. This comma is part of the list.
Of an array, right?
Structure. Yeah.
It's just delineating the elements. You could just say string 1, string 2, I guess, huh? Or XY or
You could, except we don't know
E, or
how
just,
many-
I mean, I'm thinking of like function parameters, right? Where you just have these are the parameters, assuming it's always 2 strings you're given. If not, then you could use maybe that's getting more into function stuff though. What is the asterisk, I think?
Uh-huh. So
Can
that's
you just say sentence blocks or word blocks, word
Yeah.
segments? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and go with sentence. I think that's the simplest one, but it's something that's worth thinking about. So there are a number of options, and you should think about something that is meaningful because it forces you to think about what you're doing, and it also most code in the real world, most code is read much more often than it's written. So most of your job is going to be reading other people's code and even reading your own code. And so you want to be considerate of your future self and of your coworkers. So making things as clear and simple as possible. Okay, so we have the beginnings of what this. So our final result, at least for this step, is going to be a list of strings. And so we have a list, and then we have our strings. So now what we have to do is somehow iterate over this and create sentences that we're then going to insert into this list. Any thoughts on? Well, we can start with the iteration part.
Maybe like a 4-character in text lowercase.
Okay, so what we're going to be iterating over is this, which should, in our example, again, just look like this. So we're going to start with just a string. So if we iterate over a string, what is each thing going to be?
It's gonna pick up all the individual letters and space.
Yeah, exactly. So I think char or character is a good name for it. So for character in text lowercase. Are we sure that this is going to be each individual character?
Isn't the simplest way to do it is just to write list, parentheses, and in the parentheses put text?
Okay, so you definitely could do that.
Okay.
What would the result of that be?
That'll split it by character, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. So that would create a list of, well, we can just do it real quick. So print, actually, well, first let's just confirm this. So what you should do is periodically test and make sure. So print statements are your friend. So I'm gonna run this and execute it. And it looks like what we're actually getting is each individual character. So that is what we expect it to be. So we can feel pretty confident about that. I'll also just print list. What do we call this? Text lowercase. And that is a list where each character is an element of the list.
I had the wrong idea. Okay.
Okay, so now we have access to each character. So what should we do with each character?
Start building the sentence string.
Yeah, so our general goal here is to build up this. And we're going to build up this until when?
Until we get to punctuation.
Yeah, exactly. So how would we build up this string?
You can do plus equals.
Okay, so sentence plus equals
Char.
Okay, and so if we just ran this as it is right now, what would sentence be?
Be the whole
Entire
input.
input. Oh, sorry.
Now go ahead. Yeah. So
Input.
yeah, so it would basically just be like a copy of whatever we started with, right? So we would just be recreating another string, which happens to be the exact same. So we don't exactly want to do that. we need to somehow distinguish. So the thing we care about is a period or a question mark.
So you can put in a if statement and say if char is not equal to the period or the question mark, then add it to the string.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So let's do that first. So we'll do if character. There's a couple ways we could write this. We could do if it not equal to period and char not equal to question mark. We could do this. We can also test. Let's go ahead and test the output of that. So I'm gonna set a breakpoint here. I'm gonna run the debugger. All right. In 1 second, I will step through. I'm gonna step through here. So it's gonna go through the for loop. So what I care about is sentences. So I'm just gonna watch this. Okay, so right now it's an empty string. So it's gonna go through, I'm gonna keep stepping through H, I, space, T, and keep going, keep looking through. Okay, and then notice that the next character was a period. And so this statement didn't hit, so it just jumped up, skipped it, basically. And now we have a space, and then the rest. So this looks like this is doing what we expect it to. So I'm going to stop this. Okay, so we're checking if this is a character. So yes. Does someone want to say something?
Oh, sorry, I was just clearing my throat. Sorry. Although it's combining everything, but I mean, it's not picking up the period or the question mark because we told it not to.
Exactly.
But it's kind of combining everything into one long string.
Yeah, so we're gonna presumably have to do something different when it is a period or question mark.
Would we maybe want to use range instead so that we have that index instead of the character when we reach our conditional?
Okay, so you could definitely use range. So what would be the advantage of having the index?
Because like when we find the period or the question mark or wherever the punctuation is, then that's where that loop will stop. So you could slice to, I think, wherever that index is +1, since it's not inclusive.
Okay, yeah. So we could definitely do something like that. I'm not 100% sure that that's necessary, because if we just use the character, we can still add the string, right? So whatever this character is, we're still going to need this to add this period regardless.
So could you put in another conditional and say if the char does equal the period or the exclamation mark, add it to the string and then push the string to the array and then delete the string, make the string empty again, and then it'll keep going. I don't know if that's right, but
yeah, does anyone have any thoughts about that? So the idea would be we have another condition, which is not this. So I think we could just use else probably. We could also specify. And then what you're saying is that we kind of do this same thing. So we're assuming we're looping through HITHRE and then we get to the period. So this condition doesn't match. So we go here and we're actually going to do the same thing this line, but then we're also going to do something else. So sentence will be hi there, period, at this point. And what do we want to do with sentence?
Capitalize the first letter.
Well, yeah, so eventually, yes, but we're doing this one step at a time. So the first step is to turn this into a list of strings. So this is the output. So we're not concerned about capitalizing right now. So sentence has been built up and it's now hi there, period. So what do we want to do with sentence?
We want to do sentence plus equals char one more time to get the punctuation.
Okay, so let's say we have the punctuation. So sentence is now this thing with the punctuation.
You can now append the sentence to the array.
Yeah, so the whole point of creating this is to get a chunk like this so we can add it to the array. So once our sentence is complete, once we have a sentence, then we want to add it to the array. So I'm gonna do this. So this line is doing what? I mean, what is the purpose of this line?
It's just
Adding
adding
our punctuation.
Exactly. Yeah. So we need to preserve the punctuation. So this line makes sure that we're going to add the punctuation. Once we have that, our sentence is now complete. So we want to add whatever sentence this is to our list of sentences. So sentences dot append. So same thing as like, push in JavaScript, basically same thing, just different name. And then we're going to append the sentence that we've built up. Is there anything else we need to do?
We got
If
a
you want
set.
to make the
Yeah, go ahead.
if you're
Go
going to
ahead.
make the first character uppercase, you can.
Yeah, so we're not worried about. So we're trying to follow. So we have this plan. So we want to stick with the plan for now. So
sorry.
with this step, all we care about is getting an output that matches this. So we don't care about capitalization yet.
We want to, in the else block, we want to set sentence back to an empty string after we append.
Okay, good. So what happens if we don't do that?
The sentence will just keep growing. So you'll get like the first sentence, and then the second entry will probably be the first sentence and the second sentence.
Exactly. So if we don't kind of start fresh on the next iteration, then we're just, every sentence is going to be itself plus every previous sentence. So we're going to clear sentences. Okay. So what do people think of this? Is this going to get us our expected output here?
Yes.
Let's test it out. So print sentences. Okay, so this looks right. We have hi there, period. And then we have space, how are you? Okay. So this is good. So maybe we didn't really think about this this aspect of it. We didn't really account for the fact that there is actually a space here. That might be a problem, that might not be a problem. But so we had a plan, we've gone through it. There's a slight hiccup here, something we didn't think about, which may or may not be a problem. But so that happens as you come up with a plan and then you execute it and you realize, oh, there's some other thing I need to account for. All right, so I think this is basically good for now. Let's look at the third step.
But for readability, you'd want the space, wouldn't you? For the output, at least.
Yeah, so
A new line or something.
if we are if
As
we
a, as a separate element or something that you add in, or, and that might be getting too much into the weeds, I don't know.
yeah, so so that's a good thing to think about. I guess I'm just gonna, this is obviously a contrived example, but let's just say that we have a requirement from up on high that says this is what we're gonna return. So
Okay, so it's actual, it's not the statement like you see it above with the H corrected. It's an actual array, like they want to see an array.
yes, so we're
Okay.
gonna return a list of strings here.
Right,
And this string does not start with a space.
right.
What we have right now in our intermediate output is actually not this, but this. But we didn't really account for that, which is okay. So let's try and solve this problem. That's a may or may not be a problem. We're not sure yet.
Okay.
Um,
Python have a trim function?
yes, but I'm gonna be very
Ignoring
cool.
that.
Okay, so now we need to uppercase the first word. So we have, I'll just copy this right here. So this is what we are dealing with now. And we want to uppercase the first word. The first letter of the first word.
Is that creating another variable that says that the 0, 0, 0, 0 should be upper and 0, 1 should be and 1, 0 should be upper? Would that work like as a using the method like that?
Yeah, so
oh, sorry.
yeah, so something like that could definitely work. So that's what we want. The problem is that your solution assumes that we always have two elements in the list and that the second one always starts with a space. But we don't really know that. So this sentence, the example we were given happens to be this, but it could be this. Or it could be this. So that would be a clarifying question that you might want to then ask. As you're solving a problem, if you encounter something like that, you might want to go back and ask a clarifying question about what kind of input you can expect. So we don't know, there could be 0 or 1,000,000 spaces right here. So we can't just hard code that, unfortunately.
I would want to use strip.
Yes, so would I, but I'm not allowing you to do that. So we're gonna have to kind of do this from scratch. So we have this problem is we have a list of strings. So we somehow need to go through, get each element in this list, figure out, somehow if the first letter isn't a space. So we have two kind of conditions. One, if there's a space here, and if there's not. If there's not a space, you can do what?
You can capitalize the letter. If
Yeah.
it's the first letter, if it's the first element, if you think of it, each element as its own array, so like you have nested arrays, then you could say, okay, the first element is capitalized, or you could, I guess, use a regular expression to test it against that to see where it is. Like if you have a word break or if you have white space.
Mhm.
But you still need to test it for the because you have white space before there, but you don't want to capitalize there, so you have to figure that out.
We do a we do another for in loop and then like what I would normally do is do a for in loop and then test to see whether or not what inside is a string, but we obviously know that we have strings because we already changed them. So then we could do another loop to get the index values of the actual letters, the individual letters that are in there, and then you can say if the first index is equal to a space, then capitalize the second one, and if this first index if it does match a letter, then you can capitalize that. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I like that. I think that's a good start. So we're gonna take a 10-minute break. You guys can, get some coffee, whatever, relax, or you can sit here obsessively thinking about this, and then we'll come back and we'll finish this problem.
How did you get Python on your VS Code? I didn't think VS.
All right, so we're at this point. So what we're trying to do is take some undifferentiated string input and break it up into a list of sentences. And so far, we lowercased all the text. We've broken the text into sentences. And the next step is that we need to uppercase the first word. There's a slight hitch here because we don't know what the first letter, we don't know where the first letter of the first word is going to be. So we could have one space or no spaces or a million spaces. We can start. So let's just write a for. So for, let me see what we got. What's our output here? So sentences. So sentence in sentences. What I'll do is I'll just print this, just for the sanity check. Okay. So each sentence is going to be this string. Now, yeah, would anyone else like to offer any suggestions at this point?
At this point, I think you want to write a conditional on the first index for each word or sentence rather.
Okay. So we can do so what's the condition that we want to check?
Maybe if sentence first index, so brackets is 0 equals whatever the type of string is in Python.
Okay.
Then use the upper method in Python.
Okay. So that's a good thought. Let's go into a Python interpreter real quick. So Python. And so let's check. So the question that I want to verify is an empty string still a string? So how can we check the type of something in Python?
I think you just write type before it, right?
Yeah, so in JavaScript, it's an operator, like type of, and then space, and then whatever. In Python, it's a method, so type. And we'll just check something like this. So if I call type and I pass it in, for example, this, it tells me that it's a string. So type, well, let's just see what's the type of an empty string. Still a string. Type of a space is still a string.
So you would want to declare the space rather than check for a string.
Yeah, so everything should be a string here, so we can't, checking for a string is not gonna help us distinguish here. So I'm gonna exit from this. All right, so let's do if sentence, and we'll grab the first thing. So if this is an empty, if it's a space, then what do we want to do? Well, we don't know. This is a placeholder you can use in Python if you're not sure what you want to do, but you don't want to break your code. You can just do pass, else pass.
So assuming that we know that we have just one space in front, is it possible that we could just say if that index of that string 0 is equal to a space, just move over to the second? So if sentence bracket or braces 0 equals space, then capitalize sentence 1, sentence bracket 1, and then attach it to. Now I don't know if you're gonna let a substring appear, but like, I mean, essentially that's. But yeah, does that make sense?
So I think that would be a good solution if we can assume that there's only one space.
Okay, yeah.
But unfortunately, again, due to my hard-heartedness, we cannot assume that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I forgot. Are you allowing us to use the title method or no?
The
title method?
No, not for now.
Okay.
I would want to do another loop with range for the indexes for that sentence. That way, if we are skipping the iterations, we can use I to figure out how many iterations we've skipped, and then start from there.
Okay. Why don't we try first and solve the easy case? So what do we want to do? Actually, that's here. So if we don't have a space, that's the easy case. So what are we gonna do then?
Gonna make the first letter capital.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
so how would we make the first letter capital?
Well, a couple ways. You could do the sentence 0 dot upper. I think Python has, no, I'm sure it does, where you can do substring. So you could, I think it's, would it be the brackets with a 0 and then a colon?
Yeah.
Upper.
Okay.
And then you could do a plus sign and then do the brackets and do 1 dot lower and then.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that would be a good way to do it. So for the benefit of people who may not be so familiar with Python syntax, could you explain in English without using Python syntax what it is that you're trying to do?
Oh, so Python will let you call I think it's like a function or a built-in like substring. So you can basically say, I only want the first character. And then you can say, okay, I'll make that character uppercase by then calling the built-in dot upper for that particular substring. And then you're going to need the remaining part of your string. So then you can just use the brackets to identify what part that is. So the first bracket would be 0 semicolon with nothing, I believe. And then the other one would be brackets. And so basically that 0 means that's the position you're starting at. Maybe the other side is nothing. I can't remember, but like, sorry, I'm blanking on like how to explain it in a good way.
That's fine. So that's part of the process. So thinking about,
but basically if I had to sum it up, you're splitting up that original string into the first piece, which is the first character, and the remaining characters, you're making the first character uppercase, and you're just using the concatenation plus sign to add the remaining part of that string and push it.
Yes.
Or append it. Sorry.
Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna kind of write out the example of what that is. So I think that's a good explanation. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna first off take, so this is our happy path right here, right? This is the ideal case, the easy case. So we're gonna take this and we're gonna grab the first character, which is this H, and we're gonna uppercase it. And what is this method going to return?
Should this be capital H, right?
Yes, so it's going to return a string, which will be a capital H. So this method will give us a capital H. So we've got the capital H, and then we're going to concatenate the string. So we want to take this H plus all of the string except for the first character. So we want to do that plus that. So this is basically what we want to do. And then the syntax details of how we do that, we'll see in a second. But at a high level, this is what we want to do. We want to grab the first character, we want to capitalize it, and then we want to grab everything after that character and concatenate it together. So the way you do that with Python is this. So you can uppercase it and then plus, and then we can take the sentence and we can do this. So this looks kind of bizarre if you haven't seen it before. But yeah, so this is like a slice. So we want the sentence, but we want to start at the first index and go to the end. So this colon is separating the start and the end. If we don't supply anything, it will go all the way to the end. If we do supply it, it will go to that index. So we want to start at the, not the 0th, because the 0th we're going to add on separately, but we want to start at the first index and go to the end. Excuse me. Okay, so I think this will work. So we have this now. And what are we going to do with this?
You need to create a variable.
Okay, yeah. And what should we call the variable?
New sentence. I don't know.
Okay. What's different about this sentence?
Oh, first char upper. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Let's do first upper sent. Something like that. Okay, so we have this sentence, which is going to be capital HI there. And what do we want to do with this sentence?
You need to create a new list and then get to that list.
Okay, so because this is all just one big script, we've already got something called sentences. So maybe sentences 2. Is that a good name? It's a terrible name. You all, anything 2, 3, terrible. So what is this sentences? So what is this going to be?
Maybe like corrected sentences or
okay, yeah. I like that. So corrected. All right, so we've got corrected sentences. So now we can just append that. All right, so I'm gonna go print this and see if it works. So what are we expecting to see at this point?
We should only see the first element of that original list because it's the only one that qualifies for our if statement.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. And that looks correct to me. Okay. So easy part done. Now the hard part. So we don't know if, we don't know how many, if at all. There could be 0 or more spaces before the first letter.
Would we be able to iterate through each character of the sentence and just use is space to find out if it's a white space or not?
Okay, yeah. I think, I don't know if there's specifically an is space method, but we could definitely check that. So if sentence 0, you could do for char in sentence print char equals empty space. So we got one true right here. Wait, why is it? Hold on, why is it doing it twice?
Is it because it's a nested loop?
Is the second true just picking up the white space after how maybe?
It's true. So what is the first? What is the first one though? And there's several of them. So for sentence, this is not really what I'm expecting. So if you're getting something that you're not expecting, then your model of what your code's doing is not right. So it's good to take a step back and think about it again. So we'll go over it by hand, and then we can also use the debugger to see. But so for sentence and sentence, so this sentence is going to be something like this. If sentence 0 equals an empty space, which it does not, then we're going to do this. So we're going to keep doing that over and over again. So we're going to check. We're gonna run this check. We're gonna check if H is a capital. Let's see, the first time and then the second time. And if it is, let's count how many truths we get. So 1, 2, 3.
It's all the white space, the front, the middle, and then the one between R and U.
Yeah. All right, I'm actually a little confused right now. Let me just make sure. 1, 2, 3. So false, 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 false. True, true, false, 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 false. All right, so I'm gonna use the debugger. So for let me try this one more time. So for sentence and sentence, so this will be hi there, and then we're checking if H is an empty space. It's not, so this should fall through to the else. And then we're gonna change this and we're gonna append this to corrected sentences. Then the next sentence is right here. So we're gonna check if the first letter is a space, that's true, this is gonna hit. So then if this is true, then we're gonna, for every character in this sentence, we're going to print if the character equals an empty space. So is this character an empty space? True. Is this character an empty space? False. Is this character an empty space? false, false, true. So that's where you get this true. And then false, 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 true. And then false, 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 false. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're muted, Corey. Hey Corey, you're muted.
Muted. I'm muted. I've been muted all this time. Which is a good thing because my dog is fussing, actually. I was saying because you're looking for the space first. So it skips high there, comes to this other one, and then it gives you the trues and the falses and all that. And then it executes the other one, which is interesting because I would think it wouldn't execute it at all because it met the first condition.
Yeah, so this first one is just gonna hit this one. And then this
Right.
second sentence is only gonna hit this.
Right. But I'm just, and maybe I don't understand coding well enough, but it seems to me that because the second one does have the space, it would execute that, and that would be the end of it. It wouldn't go to the else because it met the condition of the first. Of
So,
the if.
so
of the
this
conditional
one, this first one skips the if and only executes the else. And this one,
So it's doing it right. Oh, got it. Right. Yeah. Before sentence and sentence. Never mind. Yeah, it's going for both of them. Right. Right.
so something like this could work. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Well, you want to get rid of all the spaces before the first letter of the first word, right?
Yes.
So you want to somehow strip them or trim them from, but you're not letting us use trim, but you want to pop them, or it wouldn't be pop, I guess it'd be unshift or whatever Python uses. For strings, for if the first letter, if index 0 is a space, then you have to check if that one's followed by more spaces.
Yeah.
I guess.
You could use a while loop, but I don't know what that's going to look like inside of this. It's going to probably look real funky, but while you are popping from the 0 position and that position equals a space, you can, I don't know, do something with it. And then once that is no longer true, you can capitalize that value and sort of be done with it. I don't know what it looks like. I'm just sort of thinking about it.
Okay. Yeah. I think that you're onto something there.
I think I have an idea as well.
Okay.
If you build another empty string, and then or it would be similar to what Damon said, but you say if the string is empty and the space is white, then continue, else if you can start building the string.
Yeah, so we could definitely do it that way. I like that, but we've already got this logic figured out, so it would be nice if we could reuse.
Can you use that logic there, like sentence 1 : so you're taking that the rest of the sentence and appending it to the capital H. You want to get rid of the space in front of the first word. Can you use 0: to check for all of the spaces? But I mean, to the end of the thing, the problem is what you really want is all the spaces before a letter. So I don't know if you can say if sentence 0: equals empty space, if that's going to just get empty spaces before the first letter. I don't know if it'll do that or not.
Yeah, so this logic, I think we can reuse basically. The problem is that we can't hard code the 0 and we can't hard code the 1. So we need to get these dynamically. And I think a while loop would be good because we don't know. A for loop is good when you know how many things, how many iterations you want to do. whether it's like I want to iterate over an array and I want to iterate over every single item in the array. The problem is we want to iterate over a string here, but we don't know how many times we want to do it.
Do you want to create a variable then that you can assign the empty space to, or the actual characters to?
We
Or
we
set
could,
or
but
something that,
so if we want to reuse this logic, then we need to get numbers. And what do these numbers represent?
well, they represent index positions.
Yeah, exactly.
of-
So
of the
we have
character.
this string right here. So we need, so in this example, we would want to do sentence 1 dot upper plus sentence 2 colon, right?
Mhm.
So if we kind of abstract out a pattern from this, then what's the relationship between this one and this one?
It's just one higher than whatever that is.
Yeah, exactly. So if we know this one, then we know this one. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. So how are we going to get the index to start with? Well, yeah, we're gonna have to care about indexes. So,
Sub method?
huh?
Is there an index of method?
Yes, but again, we're not gonna be able to use any of the fancy stuff.
Could we set a variable called index at 0 and increment it when our condition hits?
Okay, so I equals 0, and then so we're gonna need. So if we assume that blah blah index 0, we're gonna set this index, and this index is gonna get used ultimately in here somewhere. We're gonna pull this logic in. So while it's true, what do we want to do in the while loop?
You need to look at the what you are going to be pulling that, or I don't know. I would say pop from your. Actually, can we do that?
So let me
That was
do,
I.
because it's not a list.
That would be I, right? Yeah.
okay, and then we're also gonna append this. So we could do this on one line. This is not very pretty, but that's what we're doing for now. So this logic we're just stealing from here. The question is, the point of this while loop is to get this, right?
Yep.
And you, is it? I don't know. Is it necessary to? Yeah, it is. I think it is. If we wanted to use what I was thinking about doing while whatever condition evaluates to true, like it being a space, popping 0, then you have to put that into a list, right? You're gonna need to put your that string. You're gonna have to make it into a list. Because right now it's a string.
Right. But here we don't need this to be anything other than a string.
No,
So-
no. What I guess, sorry. I guess what I'm thinking is like, so right now, like you're doing the for if sentence index 0 is equal to space. So, oh, never mind. It is no, I think that's a substring, because here's what I'm wondering. Is it a string? Because if it's a string, then you can't pop from it and get your value that you need to check whether or not it's a space or if it's a character.
Yeah. So there's no pop method on strings.
Right.
You could potentially convert the string into a list, and then you could do it that way. But I don't think we need to go through those extra steps.
Okay, all right.
So we need to get this I. So in this example, what does I need to be?
I needs to be a letter, not a white space.
It needs to be 1.
Yes. So I needs to be 1. So how are we going to get I 0 at first? How are we going to get it to 1?
I plus equals 1 in the while loop.
Okay. So I plus equals 1.
Does it only check the index 0 for empty space though?
Yes. Yeah.
Then don't we have to also check if I plus equals to 1 also is an empty space?
Okay. So we can also do that. So if sentence I equals an empty space.
Isn't the while true doing that?
Well, so I just did this initially as kind of a placeholder. So we definitely could use this. And then, so let's think about what we want to happen. We can worry about the details later.
Well, if it's while true though, like if I equals 0, while true, and if you, I guess it doesn't have a pop or an unshift. Like if you're getting rid of this, if you're getting rid of the empty spaces, it'll always be true until it's not true anymore, right?
Right. So we're not getting rid of. So let's just ignore the syntax details for a second. Our whole goal is to get I to equal whatever index of the first letter is. In
Right.
this example, it's 1. So we're starting with I is 0 in here. We're checking if this, if we even want to bother checking this at all. We do. I starts at 0. Now we're going to start a loop of some kind. We don't know how many spaces there are going to be. So we're just going to keep looping. And then we're going to increment 1. So now I is 1. And now we're checking if the sentence at 1, what's our check here going to be?
I thought that's what he was asking, was because I thought the increment handles that, because if we find spaces and then all of a sudden don't, if we find another space, that's part of our sentence. So like we do want it.
Right, but we only care about.
Right, but if you put the I plus equals 1 instead of in the while, if you put that up, so you have I equals 0 right now.
Yeah.
But I already equals 0, so if you put I plus equals 1 there, then it's basically just it's just going to the next, well, to the next whatever, I guess. I equals 1, but it's a 0.
So
1
check-
happens to be a letter, so it should, if you say while true, I'm assuming that the true is going to say, is looking for the
So while true just makes this run forever.
yeah. But if you put while plus equals 1 above the while, so what you're saying is if the first,
The
if
whole point of-
0 is an empty space.
Yeah. So I
Yes.
think there's a little bit of confusion. So this is just the initial structure to get something going. So let's stick with this and not try to improve the while loop itself, but think about the details. So while true, this is going to run infinitely. Which means at some point we're going to have to stop.
Yeah.
So
Good.
when are we going to stop? Well, we're going to stop if sentence I is what?
Doesn't equal to space.
Yes. So if this is not equal to a space, then what are we going to do?
Capitalize it.
Okay. We could. So at this point, we're done, right? We don't need the while loop anymore. We've got our correct I value. So for this example is going to be 1. So we don't need this loop anymore. We don't need to keep going. So we can exit. We can break out of this loop once we have that condition satisfied. And once we have that condition satisfied, I will be whatever the appropriate thing is, in this case 1. And then we can move on to executing this line. Does that make sense? So this is not the prettiest for sure. And you would use built-in things in real life, but for interview questions, stuff like that, they often won't ask you to do things like this. So what we're doing is we're checking if this is an empty space. If it is, then we know that we're going to have to go down this path. And this path involves figuring out where the first non-space is. How are we going to do that? We don't know. This could be this. It doesn't matter. Could be 0, could be 1, could be 100. So because we don't know, we're going to use a while loop. And we want to get, in this case, there are different ways of doing this, but in this case, we just stuck with this since we did it right here. We need to get the index to figure out the index of the first letter. So we're just going to keep chunking through space. Is it a space? If it's true, this gets incremented. We move on to the next index. Oh, it's still a space. We loop through again. I gets incremented. We check, is it a space? Still a space. And then eventually we hit this letter. It's not a space. We break out of the while loop. We have the correct index. And then we can use that index to create our string that we did. So definitely not pretty, but let's see if that works. Okay, this looks like it works to me. So hi there, hi is capitalized. How are you? The H is capitalized. We preserve the punctuation. So I think this is gonna work. Okay, so we have a working solution. I'm sure you guys have all written papers before for classes. If you're interested in writing a paper that isn't absolutely terrible, you're gonna want to edit it, right? So you don't just like write something down and then print it and send it off or whatever. You write it, you come back to it later and you reread it and say, oh, I don't like this paragraph. Change this. I'm going to add this. I'm going to remove this, and so on. So writing code is the same. It's the same thing. It's an iterative process. You don't just spit out whatever you spit out and then call it a day. So we're gonna go through that process. So I'm gonna create edits. I'm just gonna number these, even though I guess they don't do that. All right, so I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna get rid of these comments for now. All right. Let me make this smaller so you can see it in one go. All right, any comments about this? What's good about it? What's bad about it?
If we get some other punctuation in our sentences, it'll fail. Like if it's not specifically a period or a question mark.
Okay.
If there's some other weird characters in there.
That's true. Yeah. So for this contrived example, we're assuming that the input is quality controlled, but yeah, you know, that's definitely a good thing to think about. You want to do error checking and have more robust stuff, but we'll ignore that for now. But that's definitely something you can think about.
The time space complexity is pretty large.
Okay. Yeah. We'll talk more about that later. So I don't want to worry about that, but yeah, that is a good thing to think about. And there are some there are definitely some issues with that. Could be could be more efficient.
Could
What
you
about
run
the-
into like?
Yeah.
Could you run into issues like if in the string there's a new line or just something else that would create a white space, and then below where we're trying to just get rid of those white spaces, we might mess something up.
Yeah, definitely. So that kind of goes back to what Philip was saying, where you know you want to have more robust input checking. So yeah, that's a good thing to think about, but I'm just gonna ignore it. So I guess what I'm trying to get people to think about is the structure of this. How is this organized?
Kind of messy, kind of hard to read.
Are you trying to get it concise?
Is this if you were to look at, if you had never seen this before and you just looked at it for like 2 seconds?
I would move all the variables up and compact them. Maybe.
Okay. Is this doing one thing?
We could put like little notes saying what each different area is doing.
Sure. Yeah, we could, kind of like we had here. So
Mhm.
okay.
Are you saying we could make a function for the list or for returning the list since that's its job?
Well, yeah, so I think that would be, so we have, if we add the comment in, it looks like we're maybe not just doing one thing. So if I were to just look at this at a glance, I would say, well, this must be doing one thing because it's just one big blob. But if you add the comments in, well, maybe it's not just one thing. So could we impose a little bit more organization on this? So I think one way of doing that would be to take all of these chunks and put them into functions.
The 3 functions. One acts as a value to the next.
Yep, we could do something like def make lowercase. And what would make lowercase take as input?
It would take this text, the string or the
Okay.
variable, this text.
Cool. And what would it return?
Return the string.
Yep.
Or text lowercase.
Yeah. So we return that. Okay. What about this guy? What will be a good name for this function?
Separate sentences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Separate sentences.
Intermediate sentence list or something.
Okay. So what are we returning from this?
You could call this strings with no leading spaces. Capitalized strings with no leading spaces function.
So this one is not doing that. This one is taking a string, a text, undifferentiated text, and creating a list of strings. So
Maybe
Str-
lowercase string, a list, lowercase list.
String breakup.
okay. So we could do this. Is this method necessarily dependent on this one?
No,
No,
Depends on the punctuation.
Yeah. So I'm gonna
separate
say
by punctuation.
what's that?
Maybe separate by punctuation.
Okay. I'm just gonna call it create sentences on so there's lots of different possible names you come up with. I'm gonna go with that. So create sentences on punctuation, and then what does this need to accept as input?
to make lowercase that function? Or would you take the other function as the value, or would you have to do text lowercase as the value?
Well, there's a
As the
question.
parameter, I mean.
There's a question about is this one does this one need to be dependent directly on this one?
No, you can just
Needs
put
to
text
see
in
it.
because when you do the for in loop, you're already lowering casing it, right? You're calling. Oh, actually, no, you're calling on this one. So, yes.
You can
So
just take any string, right?
yes, yeah, we don't. So in general, when you're coding, you want to avoid creating dependencies between things. You can avoid it. So in this case, all this thing needs is a string. So I'm just gonna call it text as well. So it's true in the context we're using this, but what if we want to use this function later for something else? So this is something that can stand on its own. This is a piece of logic. All it does is it takes a text and it splits them on punctuation. And if we ever wanted to, again, like this is hard coded, but we could potentially pass in a list of characters, right? And then, so we could take another parameter. We could make this function more general. But yeah, so if you don't have to make something dependent on something else, then don't do it. So now we have this, and what about this guy?
Do we need to return the array from the previous function?
Right, so again, there's a question of, can this be an independent function? What does it take as input, and what does it return?
An array, and then it returns another array.
Yeah. So this function can exist and be perfectly happy without any of these other functions, right? So what does it do?
It capitalizes the first letter of a sentence and it removes the white spaces before any other sentences.
Yeah. So some of these names might not be pretty, but capitalize first letter, not space, something like that. So what does this need to take in as a parameter?
An array
Next.
or a list.
Yeah, so yeah, same thing, just yeah. So I'll just I think calling this a mixed loop is fine. Okay. So now we've taken the logic and we've wrapped it up into things that can be used individually. So the first version, it's just one big block. This one, we can put it into more self-contained units, and then these units can be reused elsewhere. So it gives us a lot more flexibility. And then this, for example, is pretty easy to change. So if we wanted to, I'm just going to do this right here. So punked. So I'm going to I'll change this slightly. So caret not in punked. So this will be an array of, or actually it could just be a string. So this would be something like dot. So this syntax will work here. So now not only were we able to modularize everything so we could reuse it elsewhere, but now we can make this even more general. Whereas if we're still stuck over here, well.
Do you have to define punct now though, so it knows what to look for?
You do when you pass it in, but that gives you more control. So when you call it, you pass in the punct, the punctuation.
Oh, right.
So if we wanted to actually run this, we can't just call corrected sentences, because that doesn't exist. So we're gonna have to call these in order. So the way we call it, we could write yet another function that would be like, that will combine everything together. So def, let's do edit text. It's going to take in some text. I'm going to move this over here. Also eliminated global variables, which is always a good thing to do. So we have text, and what is this going to do? Well, this is going to run through, it's going to tie all these other methods together. So we're going to call make lowercase. Make lowercase with the text. And then we're going to call create sentences on punct. And this is going to take lowered, and it's also going to take, we'll just do this. And then we're going to call this capitalized. This is going to take sentences. And then we can return this. So now we can call edit text with this text right here. So if we've done everything correct, we should get the exact same output here. So Python edit 2. So we got an issue here. So someone tell me, let me zoom in.
It's the return that in the second function isn't there.
Okay, so can you tell me how you would make sense of this?
I see that it's telling us to check something at line 45, 40, and 24. So I would look at those and see 40 looks good. So
okay, so you can start. Typically, you'll start at the bottom here. So we get an error. None type object is not iterable, which may not be all that helpful, but we know that, after you've been doing this for a while, you can see that. So we've got a none somewhere when we're expecting, a list or something like that. So it's happening here. So line 24. So jump to line 24 for sentence in sentences. So probably sentences is not anything. So we can go back here. So we know that sentences, so we're calling create sentences on punct right here. Actually, it's right. This is where it's happening. Capitalized first letter, blah, blah, blah. So we're passing in sentences, and sentences is none. So in Python, under what circumstances would a variable be none?
The empty value, no value in it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it means. So if we're calling a method and we're assigning the return value to sentences, and the return value is none,
Then there's nothing's getting assigned to it, right? So that variable, that array is empty then. Because sentences is that array, is it not?
it should be an array, but I'm calling this method, and what do you know about a method if the return value is none, or a function?
The function didn't work.
I mean, there are functions and methods that return none on purpose.
Isn't that what you get without a return? Like if you don't return anything, then it will automatically put none.
Yep. So if you write a function, sometimes you do want it to return none, like print, for example. Print doesn't return anything. And if it doesn't return anything, then it returns none. In this case, create sentences on punct, we don't want to return nothing. So what do we forget here? What did I forget?
Return sentences.
Sorry?
Return the sentence.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't have a return statement here. So return sentences. So I was doing all this work and then it wasn't actually returning anything. If I run this again, I get none. So there's no error, right? So I got through here, so lowered. We could use the debugger and check what this is. I'm not going to do that right now. But this is returning a value, make lowercase. We're returning that value. Sentences, create sentences on punct. This is returning a value now. Caps, so capitalize first letter, not space.
But that one's not returning. Do you need to return one there too?
Exactly. So we didn't get an error that time. We just got none. So we have to, be careful. So return corrected sentences. And then there, that's the output that we expect. All right. Any questions? I do want to, let me see. There's a way to do this in one line. Let's see. Find this. Just to show you. So if I allowed you guys to actually do that, so we would do. So some of this stuff is a little more advanced, and we'll learn about this later. But I'm gonna import RE. I'm gonna use regular expressions here, and so I'm gonna take a list. So I'm just gonna copy this.
Are they the same as in other programs, regular expressions? Like you're not learning like different, there's not different syntax for different, like for JavaScript has a regex and all the different, the \n or whatever. D for digit, that sort of thing. It's just the
slight differences. There's different dialects of regular expressions, but basically the same. So we started with this. We just kind of wrote it as a script, like a nondescript blob of stuff, which is fine initially, but that's not really, it's not good. It's not what you want to do unless it's just like 1 or 2 lines maybe. So here you can break this up into some functions. It puts some structure on it. You can generalize things. You can get reusability. And then here, just for fun, is a way to do it in 1 line if you could use built-in stuff. Okay.
One question: why did you have to import? I guess that 48 means import regular expressions. Like, isn't that their default, or you always have to do that?
Yeah. So we'll learn more about some of this stuff later, but Python has, there's like the standard, there's like the core Python stuff, which includes, you know, for loops and, you know, basically all the stuff we used here, upper, all that stuff. There's also more specialized modules, and there's a whole bunch of them. So regular expressions. So to use regular expressions, rather than kind of making the whole language one big thing, they break it up into different modules. So you just have to import them. So it comes with Python, but you have to import it. And then there's also third-party modules. But we'll see that stuff later. All right, today was a pretty long, brutal lecture, so I'm gonna end it.